One defended Kyiv against one of the most devastating invasions medieval Europe had ever witnessed. Another helped rebuild Cossack power on lands devastated by decades of war. A young woman became an officer when armies barely permitted women to serve. And a village teacher created a resistance movement in the forests of central Ukraine. Yet, most people have never heard their names. Ukraine's history is often told through famous princes, celebrated Cossack hetmans, presidents, and generals. But behind those familiar names were other people, commanders whose stories survived in only a few lines of a chronicle, officers whose portraits disappeared, and local leaders who fought long after larger armies had already been defeated. They did not all serve the same state. They lived under different borders, carried different flags, and understood their identity through the realities of their own time. Medieval Rus was not the same political world as the Cossack hetmanate, and neither was identical to the Ukrainian republics that emerged in the 20th century. But across these changing eras, the same pattern repeatedly appeared. When political power collapsed and communities were threatened, individuals stepped forward to organize resistance. These are four of their stories. And the first begins in Kyiv in the winter of 1240. By 1240, the Mongol armies had already destroyed or captured cities across a vast part of Eurasia. Principalities that had fought against one another were now facing a military power unlike anything they had experienced before. Kyiv remained one of the most important cities of Rus. A religious center, a political symbol, and a gateway to the lands farther west. But the city's most powerful ruler was not there to defend it. Prince Danilo Romanovich had placed Kyiv in the hands of a commander named Dmytro. The chronicles identify him as a Taishatsky, a senior military and administrative official, and as one of Danilo's trusted commanders. Yet almost everything else about him remains a mystery. We do not know exactly where he was born. We do not know his age in 1240. No portrait of him survives. Even the details of his early life have disappeared. Yet almost everything else about him remains a mystery. But we know what he did when Batu's army reached Kyiv. Dmytro organized the city's defense. Kyiv's surviving inhabitants gathered behind its walls. Soldiers and civilians prepared to face an enemy that had already overwhelmed much larger territories. This was not a battle that Dmytro could realistically expect to win. Dmytro remained among the defenders and was wounded during the battle. Kyiv finally fell. Normally, the story might have ended there. But the chronicle records an extraordinary detail. Dmytro was brought before Batu alive, and according to the chronicler, the conqueror ordered that he should not be killed because of his courage. Even the enemy commander recognized the determination with which Dmytro had defended the city. Normally, the story might have ended there. But the chronicle records an extraordinary detail. Kyiv was devastated, but the story of its commander survived. Not in a great monument, not in a royal biography, only in fragments written by chroniclers who understood that his final defense deserved to be remembered. Dmytro could not save Kyiv. But more than 7 centuries later, his name remains connected to the moment when the city stood against an empire. 250 years later, another commander would emerge on lands ruined by war. But his mission would be different. He would not only defend a city, he would help rebuild an entire frontier. By the late 17th century, right-bank Ukraine had endured decades of warfare, changing borders and repeated invasions. Towns had been damaged, villages had been abandoned, Entire regions had lost much of their population. In this unstable world, Cossack regiments returned to the frontier. One of the commanders leading this revival was Andrii Abazyn. His origins are unknown. Historians cannot say with certainty when he was born, where his family came from. There is no reliably authenticated portrait showing his face. Yet by approximately 1690, Abazyn had become the Cossack colonel of Bratslav, an important military and administrative position. Abazyn's role was not limited to warfare. He and his fellow officers encouraged people to return to lands that had been emptied by years of destruction. New and restored settlements appeared around the Cossack regiments. Military organization, local government, and everyday survival became closely connected. These communities needed protection from raids, but they also needed courts, leadership, and a system capable of restoring order. Abazyn participated in campaigns against Ottoman and Crimean Tatar forces and became an experienced frontier commander. However, the Cossack revival was creating a political problem for the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. What had begun as military organization was gradually developing into a form of local Cossack government. In 1699, the Commonwealth's parliament ordered the liquidation of the remaining right-bank Cossack regiments. Cossack officers were expected to surrender the power they had built and abandon the communities that depended on them. They refused. In 1702, a major rebellion began. It became so widespread that contemporaries compared it to a second Khmelnytsky uprising. Semenpali became its most famous commander. But Andrii Abazyn was one of its central leaders. His forces operated across Bratslav and Podylia and helped capture the strategically important town of Nemiriv. For a short time, it appeared that Cossack authority might continue across much of the Russian. The Commonwealth responded with a major military campaign. In February 1703, Abazyn's forces fought near Ladynji. The Cossacks were overwhelmed, and Abazyn, was captured. He was late rescued. The rebellion continued, but his partner was never forgotten. Semenpali became a popular memory. Andrii Abazyn became little more than a name in specialist history. Semenpali was not simply a warrior. He represented a generation trying to restore community, military organization, and Cossack government on lands that decades of war. Dmytro, the city, was about to fall. Abazyn tried to rebuild society. Before we continue, which of these tell us in the comments. Because unlike these first two men, this one is forgotten origin is captured by a camera. Olena Stepaniv was born in Asia in 1892. Before the First World War, she studied at Voivode University and became involved in Ukrainian schools like scouting, physical training organization. When the First World War began in 1914, Ukrainian volunteers in Galicia formed the Legion of Ukrainian Sich Riflemen within the Austro-Hungarian military. circulated far beyond Galicia. Newspapers presented her as something unusual. A woman wearing an officer's uniform and serving alongside male soldiers. But the photographs showed only part of the story. Later in 1915, Stepaniv was captured by Russian forces and spent approximately 2 years as a prisoner of war. She returned in 1917, traveling across the continent already beginning to collapse into revolution. Most people would have considered her military story finished. It was not. When Austria-Hungary disintegrated and the West Ukrainian People's Republic was declared in 1918, Stepaniv served again, this time in the Ukrainian Galicia Army. Her resistance also continued outside the military. After the war, she completed a doctorate in historian, geography, and teaching. She researched published the academic education and scholarship in her foreign self-made authorities arrested her in 1949. She spent years in prison before returning to the in 1986. Olena Stepaniv's life crossed several different worlds. Austria, the Ukrainian struggle for statehood, interwar Poland, and the Soviet Union. In each of them, she found a new way to serve. She is sometimes described online as the first female officer in the war. That is difficult to prove and ignores other women who served in earlier armies. But we do not need to exaggerate her story. The documented truth is already remarkable. Olena Stepaniv was one of the earliest prominent female officers in Ukrainian military history. A prisoner of war, later a scholar, whose battlefield career continued long after she left. While Stepaniv was fighting for Ukrainian state, another young officer was returned to his duties in Central Europe. Before the revolution, teacher, soon thousands of his parents were peasants. They worked to provide their sons with an education. Vasyl became a village teacher. Then the First World War transformed his life. He was mobilized, completed officer training, and returned home in 1917 with military experience few people in his community possessed. But the war around him was not ending. The Russian Empire had collapsed. The Ukrainian People's Republic had declared independence. Bolshevik forces advanced from Russia. White armies attempted to restore an undivided empire, while local armed groups fought for territory and survival. Central Ukraine became a battlefield with no stable authority. In the region around Kholodnyi Yar, villagers faced raids, confiscations, and political violence. He called on the surrounding villages to organize. Teachers, farmers, former soldiers, and local workers joined the resistance. What began as self-defense developed into the Highdomaka regiment of Kholodnyi Yar. Vasyl became its military leader, while his brother Petro played a central role in its defense. Later generations would call the territory they controlled the Kholodnyi Yar Republic. It was not a conventional international welfare state. It was a network of armed villages and local authorities that refused to accept either Bolshevik or white Russia. The movement declared its loyalty to the Ukrainian People's Republic and restored Ukrainian Republican laws where it controlled territory. Its black flag Kholodnyi Yar organization continued fighting for several more years, even after the regular Ukrainian Republican armies had been forced out of most of Ukraine. Soviet security forces eventually defeated the movement through military pressure, infiltration, and arrests. For decades afterward, official Soviet history described people like Chuchupak as criminals and bandits. The fact that he had been a teacher, a Ukrainian officer, and a leader supporting the Ukrainian People's Republic was pushed out of public memory. But his photograph survived. In it, he does not resemble an untouchable legendary warrior. He looks like what he really was, a young man whose community asked him to defend it, and who accepted responsibility far greater than anyone could have expected from a village teacher. Dmytro, Andrii Abazyn, Olena Stepaniv, and Vasyl Chuchupak did not fight the same way. They did not live under the same flag. And they did not understand the word Ukraine in exactly the same political way. Dmytro belonged to the world of medieval Rus. Abazyn defended the military and political order of the Cossack frontier. Stepaniv fought during the birth of modern Ukrainian statehood. Chuchupak attempted to preserve that statehood after larger armies had already begun to retreat. Their stories should not be forced into a single, simplified legend. The real history is more complicated and more powerful. Each of them appeared during the war. When a city had been abandoned by its ruler, Dmytro. The decades of war had entered the right back. Abazyn restored its communities and regiments. Military service was considered a male work. Stepaniv claimed the right to fight. And central authority disappeared from the villages of Cherkasy. Chuchupak transformed local self-defense into an organized resistance. Most historical figures as their lives were important. They are forgotten because their records were destroyed. Because their enemies wrote the official history. Or because later generations preferred simple national legends. Recovering their stories does not mean turning them to myth. It means placing them back into history. Dmytro, the commander whose enemies spared him for his courage. Andrii Abazyn, the Cossack hero whose face has been lost. Olena Stepaniv, the officer who continued her struggle through military service, education, and scholarship. Vasyl Chuchupak, the teacher who became the autonomy of Kholodnyi